So over the weekend, I saw this clip of Joe Rogan going around where he's calling out the Trump administration for stripping out due process rights away from people like Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And this is definitely the right thing to do. The Trump administration is absolutely in the wrong here, and they are trying to strip away one of the fundamental pillars of a free society. But I think what people are missing in the Joe Rogan clip is that he is making his argument less potent by trying to kind of both sides the issue. Instead of coming out and just straight condemning what the Trump administration is doing here, he tries to give equal argument to, oh, well, maybe the Trump administration is doing it because, they're fighting back against what the Biden administration had done before him. And I think this is really making his argument less potent. And he's kind of doing a disservice to the people who listen to Rogan because now there is some plausible deniability for what the Trump administration is actually doing. So let's go ahead and take a look at this first clip where he's talking about how the left is making a good argument for keeping due process. If you guys do appreciate my work, please do remember to subscribe.
Like the other side is making a very legitimate argument about the right to due process if you get processed and shipped out of the country and put in a prison in El Salvador. What is the quote? Was it Benjamin Franklin's quote about innocent and that it's better to allow 10 guilty people to go free than one innocent person arrested? I'm on that side of things.
Yeah.
I think due process exists for a reason, and the reason is it is horrific for someone to be accused of something they didn't do, be imprisoned for crimes they didn't commit, and then live in a cell, live in a cage with a bunch of
people who did commit shit.
Here it is, Benjamin Franklin. It's better 100 guilty persons should escape than one innocent person should suffer. That is wisdom.
Yeah.
That has survived hundreds of years. It's incredibly accurate, and it is the foundation of freedom. Like, we have to make sure that these people are actually guilty, otherwise we become monsters.
Now look, Joe Rogan is absolutely right here, and I truly believe that Joe Rogan believes this. He thinks that, 100 people should go free who may have been guilty than to let one innocent person rot behind bars. That is absolutely the right thing, right? This is why due process exists. That way we have a process to try to weed out the people who might be innocent, and I do think Joe Rogan believes this. Do not get me wrong. And I think, this was one of the things that we saw in Trump's first administration with the family separation policy. Joe Rogan spoke out very fervently against that, and rightfully so. It was an absolutely horrendous policy. So while I do believe that Joe Rogan believes in these things, and I do think he's on the right side here, listen to how he kind of frames this argument as though, the Trump administration is just kind of fighting back against Biden's policies.
But also you also have to deal with the fact that the current administration is dealing with the past administration allowing known gang members and terrorists to go right through the border unchecked. That a lot of them they know got through. They don't know the exact numbers, but they know there's millions and millions of people illegally just walk through unchecked, and a bunch of them have to have criminal records. A bunch of them have to be dangerous. And we've seen crimes that have been committed.
So this is where Joe Rogan's conspiracy brain just gets the better of him. You'll notice here that he's saying, oh, well, the Biden administration, they just let in millions upon millions of people. And so, we had to do something about that, right? Except that didn't really happen. The Biden administration opened up that CBP-1 app and allowed people to follow a process to try to seek asylum in our country. But Joe Rogan is trying to make it sound like Biden just opened up the borders and anybody and everybody was allowed to walk through and just come wreak havoc on the United States of America. That just did not happen. Now, of course, there are people that came across the border in an illegal way. They didn't check in with a port of entry or anything like that. Of course, that exists. But that is a small subset of the people who came into the country under the Biden administration. Many of the people who came in were seeking asylum. And that is a legal process that our country affords people when we think they have a credible claim. And yes, maybe the courts were backed up and we had a huge rush after COVID, so our borders did get overwhelmed. But to try to couch this in, oh, well, Biden just let all these people over the border and he wasn't doing any due process or anything at all and just letting everybody come in, it's just not true. And so on the one hand, you can say Joe Rogan is right for calling out the Trump administration for, shipping off Kilmar Abrego Garcia to El Salvador without any due process. But when you follow it up with, oh, well, he's just kind of responding to the Biden policies, then it kind of just makes your argument less potent. And then he goes on to say, well, both sides kind of have to deny some sort of human rights, don't they?
It's one of those things where to support one side of this, you have to deny some basic human values. Either way, to support just rounding people up and just assuming they're all gang members. I'm not saying they're doing that, but this is the worst case scenario, right?
Yeah.
They get a bunch of people in a room, they rope them all in, and one guy's just someone's cousin picking someone up to give him a ride home. That's possible.
And now you're back on the one innocent person now you're right back.
And what if that dude is not doing anything wrong and he's got some stupid tattoos and they decide that this guy's a gang member and now you're in a prison in El Salvador and you're not even from El Salvador. And now, you were just a hairdresser or you were a tattoo artist or
Family
whatever
man.
you are.
Yeah.
You came over here and maybe you got a green card and maybe you don't. Maybe you were just given asylum because a lot of people from Venezuela were given asylum in America.
Yeah.
And then you get shipped to El Salvador where you're not even from El Salvador. So that the fact that exists scares the shit out of me. But also the fact that they were just letting terrorists and gang members flow freely into the country is fucking horrible. And when you talk about innocent people, what about the innocent people that got murdered by terrorists and well, not terrorists, that really hasn't happened, but gang members and this Trender Wagwa that were taking over those apartment buildings in Aurora, Colorado, and that's scary shit, man.
So again, Joe Rogan is basing this both sidesism on something that didn't happen. There was no Trende Aragua gang who was taking over buildings in Colorado. The officials in that city came out and said that wasn't happening. Now, there may have been a few run-in with police, with people who may have been part of a gang, but Joe Rogan is just buying the MAGA propaganda hook, line, and sinker, trying to say that Biden just let in all the terrorists and all the gang members. They didn't check anybody, and everybody just flowing across the border. It was a madhouse, except that didn't happen. So on the one hand, you can say that the Trump administration is definitely denying people their basic rights by stripping due process rights away. But on the other hand, you can't say that about Biden. You can say that people may have got through the border when they shouldn't have got through, but Biden was not purposefully allowing people into the country to try to wreak havoc on our society. That just did not happen. So this is why I say that his argument just gets defanged, because you're trying to weigh both sides of the scale as though they are somehow even, when that is just not the case at all. And you'll notice that he said there, I'm not saying that the Trump administration is rounding up a whole bunch of people and sending them to El Salvador. I'm not saying that. But that is what is happening, Joe. That's exactly what is happening. And further analysis has showed that 70 to 90% of these people have no criminal record at all. So the problem might be way worse than we initially thought. And to try to, equate these things with what the Biden administration was doing, it's just disingenuous. And now your viewers can come away thinking that, oh, well, maybe this might be an okay thing to do because we're fighting back against the scourge that was the Biden administration. It is doing an absolute disservice to everybody involved here. They then go on to talk about how, we're just fighting back against the radicalization of the Biden administration, or the overcorrection to the radicalization.
The problem with things that are going in a radical direction, and then there's an overcorrection. So the overcorrection is lack of due process. The overcorrection is round them all up, ship them to jail. That's some things that you say when you're not thinking things through. What do you do about all the criminals? Take them all, fucking send them to El Salvador.
Yeah.
What about due process? No, fuck that. But here's the problem with fuck that. What if you are an enemy of, let's not say any current president. Let's pretend we got a new president, totally new guy in 2028, And this is a common practice now of just rounding up gang members with no due process and shipping them to El Salvador. You're a gang member. No, I'm not. Prove it. What? I got to go to court. No, no due process.
That's
right?
dangerous, Joe.
That's dangerous. That's dangerous. That's dangerous. We got to be careful that we don't become monsters while we're fighting monsters.
Now, again, Joe Rogan is absolutely right here. We don't want to become the monsters that we are supposedly fighting. But what the Trump administration is doing is not necessarily just a swing back from the Biden radicalization era. That is not what is going on here. In Trump, stripping away due process rights away from folks is not something that the American people signed up for. And in fact, we have seen quite heavy blowback to what the Trump administration is doing because they are stripping away due process rights. This is not what the American people signed up for. And now we know that the pendulum swings back and forth, but to say we had a huge rush at the border after COVID does not make it okay for what the Trump administration is currently doing. And I know that that is not what Joe Rogan is saying. He is absolutely on the right side of this issue. He's saying that stripping due process rights away from folks is dangerous, and he is absolutely right about that. Because if the government is just allowed to come round you up and accuse you of being in a gang or accuse you of committing some crime, and then they afford you no process to refute the claims against you, well, like Joe Rogan said, then we have no freedom. That's not a free society. So Joe Rogan is absolutely right here. He's calling the Trump administration out for the right thing. But then he follows it up with this next statement where he says that, well, these dangerous criminals are here and they're even getting our government welfare.
No, there's people that are 48 years old and dedicated to crime. They've been dedicated to crime in Guatemala, and now they're here, and now they're selling fentanyl, and they're not going to stop. Okay?
They don't give a fuck.
Yeah, and they're on EBT cards where you're getting money from the government for free every month because you're in a sanctuary city, and you get free food, and you're a criminal. And then one of them, like two of them, assaulted cops in New York City and then got free. No cash bail. No cash bail. You just get out. They assaulted cops, and then they're on the street giving the Tupac to the camera.
Again, he has bought the MAGA propaganda hook, line, and sinker. That guy that he's talking about that got out of jail and was flipping the bird to the cameras, it turned out that that guy was not involved in the attack on police that they were claiming that he was a part of. That's why he was flipping the bird to the cameras, because he was not guilty of the crime that they had supposedly locked him up for. But Joe Rogan doesn't know any of that. Now, and to say that all of these gang members or these terrorists are coming in and they're getting all of our welfare, can he point to me a single example of that actually happening? Now, I guess it's plausible that maybe a couple gang members were able to successfully seek asylum and they're here and maybe they're receiving some sort of benefit, but I don't even think I would grant you that. I don't think it's the gang members who are coming in who are trying to get asylum and then are going off and getting EBT. I don't even think that happens. Now, if you come to the country and you present yourself to asylum and then you get accepted into our asylum program, there could be benefits that you might get from that. But it's not this luxurious lifestyle that Joe Rogan is making it out to be. It's not all of these different criminals just living off the federal government. That is absolute nonsense. But this is the story that the Trump administration pushed before he got elected for a second time. He demonized all of these people as one big group, not distinguishing between asylum seekers and people who actually crossed over the border illegally. And now you got people like Joe Rogan, who is kind of casting them all under one net and trying to make them all out to be bad people, while calling out the Trump administration for stripping due process rights away. It is absolutely insane to me. And then I'll show you this one last clip where they're talking about how it's just two teams fighting against each other, when I would just reject that whole cloth.
So the question becomes, like, how much of it is our own folly? How much of it is just natural human behavior? How much of it is like the right wants law and order, so we don't want law and order. The right wants to punish prisoners. We want to, no, it's racism. It's like, what is it?
Well, that's just teams fighting. That's yeah.
But also, I feel like it's manipulated as well.
Again, I don't think there is anybody out there on the left that you could point to or at least not anybody prominent. Maybe, obviously, you've got crazy lefties. I will grant you that. But we don't just go around saying that we don't want to enforce our laws because the Trump administration was barbaric in enforcing the laws. That is not what is happening here. We want the rule of law to mean something in this country. If you come over the border in an undocumented way and you don't follow the process and you get rounded up and given due process and get deported, then that is okay by me. That is what is supposed to happen. But that's not what the Trump administration is doing. They are just accusing these people of being criminals in some way, and then they're using that as a pretext to ship them off to a gulag down in El Salvador. And they weren't given any due process to refute those claims. And yes, I know there are people out there that want to do the exact opposite of what the other party is doing, but that is not what is going on in this particular case. To think that we were trying to defund the police all over the country is just absurd. Maybe it happened in a few jurisdictions, but you know what, Joe? Many of those policies got rolled back, and they're not even something that we are contending with today. So to try to, again, he's trying to both sides this picture. He's trying to weigh these out as though they're on equal footing, but that is not what is going on here. The Biden administration had to deal with a flood at the border. They tried their best to, put people through the asylum process, making sure that they were going through some sort of due process. And yes, they should have acted more aggressively sooner. That didn't happen. I will grant you that. But that does not make it okay for the Trump administration to come into office, to strip due process rights away from folks, and then ship them off to a country in a faraway land. That is absolutely insane. So you can't just both sides this issue. Now, again, Joe Rogan is on the right side of this issue. He rightfully understands that due process being stripped away means that none of us are truly free, and he is absolutely right about that. But when you go on to try to muddy the waters, when you go on to try to paint the other side as some crazy lunatics that the Trump administration is just responding to or fighting back against, well, then you're doing a disservice to not only all of your viewers, but to the rest of America who could fall into this very same trap. What the Trump administration is doing is wrong. They are making us less safe and less free in our own country, and it is nowhere close to what the Biden administration had to deal with at all. So I will leave it there for now, folks. If you guys got anything out of this video, please do remember to smash that like button and subscribe. Maybe share with a friend or two. I'd very much appreciate that. We are trying to build something here on the left that adequately pushes back against the right-wing media ecosystem that just shovels this kind of shit day in and day out. So if you do like what I do here, please do remember to smash that subscribe button. It is free. And if you guys want to see a Chris Van Hollen and how his trip to El Salvador went to do a wellness check on Kilmar Abrego Garcia, go ahead and watch that video on the screen now. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on the next one.